Star Wars The Force Unleashed is one of the most iconic Star Wars stories outside of the films. Yet it's also one of the most misunderstood. Over the years, people have carried around impressions of the story that come almost entirely from the video game. When people talk about Starkiller's power level, his duel with Vader, or his final stand against the Emperor, the images they remember usually come straight from the video game. But the narrative of The Force Unleashed isn't just a game, it's also a novelization. And among Expanded Universe fans, the novel is widely regarded as the clearest and most accurate version of events. This is because the book strips away gameplay mechanics and presents the story in a form that feels much more grounded, cohesive, and consistent within the broader EU and Star Wars itself. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the misconceptions that come from relying on the game alone, and explaining why the book's portrayal of events is the true canonical version. One of the biggest misconceptions surrounding The Force Unleashed is the idea that the game itself represents the literal version of events. For many people, their only exposure to the story came straight through gameplay, fast-paced combat, exaggerated force powers, and long cinematic boss battles. Because these sequences are so visually striking, they leave a powerful impression. Starkiller appears to be massively overpowered and is even stronger than the Chosen One. It creates the illusion that this is the canonical power level of the character, and that everything shown in the gameplay is meant to be taken literally. But this is where the first layer of misunderstanding comes from. Video games like The Force Unleashed rely on power fantasy, pacing, and mechanical escalation. They exaggerate abilities so players feel powerful and engaged. Games must inflate spectacle, novels don't. This is why most Expanded Universe fans lean on the novelization when they want to understand what actually happened in the story. One of the clearest examples of how these misunderstandings spread is the final showdown between Starkiller and Darth Vader on the Death Star. When most people recall this moment, they think of the full multi-phase boss battle in the game. It's intense, it's dramatic, and it's lengthy, with Vader taking massive amounts of damage. The natural takeaway from this is that Starkiller decisively overpowered Vader. This becomes the root of all arguments claiming Starkiller is stronger than the Chosen One in a fair fight. But the novelization presents a very different version of the duel. In the book, Vader initially overwhelms Starkiller. His discipline, strength, and experience dominates the early portion of the battle. Starkiller is pushed to his limits, and the fight is far less balanced than the game makes it appear. In the novelization, it's revealed that Vader saw Starkiller as the son he believed he lost when Padme died. That emotional undercurrent affects the way Vader approaches their duel. The turning point happens not because Starkiller suddenly surpasses Vader, it's because Starkiller triggered a nearby generator to explode. But the blast turns out far larger and more destructive than he had expected. The resulting shockwave overwhelms Vader and leads to his defeat. Meanwhile, the game's version of the fight is designed to be fun and cinematic. Big moves, flashy finishes, and spectacle over accuracy. The novelization shows a far more grounded exchange, where circumstance, not superiority, creates Starkiller's advantage. Another misconception comes from the so-called confrontation between Starkiller and Palpatine, mainly because there's an actual duel you have with Palpatine and Starkiller seemingly defeats him. Over time, fans who rely on the game alone began describing this moment as Starkiller fighting or even matching the Emperor. But this is not what happens in the novelization. In the book, the exchange is extremely brief and entirely one-sided. It's essentially the cutscene that plays out when you defeat Palpatine in the game. Palpatine showers Starkiller with lightning, but it's pushed back by Starkiller, long enough to have Bail Organa, Juno, Coda, and everyone else to escape, which then results in Starkiller essentially sacrificing himself for them to escape. There is no drawn-out clash, no extended fight, and no suggestion that Starkiller is anywhere close to the Emperor's level. The book emphasizes that Palpatine emerges from the explosion completely unharmed, with only mild scorch marks on his robes. The moment is not a victory but a sacrifice, driven by Starkiller's choice rather than his strength. This detail is essential for understanding the story accurately, and it gets lost when people rely solely on the game's dramatic framing. A lot of people treat the gameplay from Force Unleashed as literal story events. When players see Starkiller performing absurd feats, pulling down a Star Destroyer with apparent physical strength and power in the Force, generating enormous force blasts, or wiping out dozens of stormtroopers, they often forget that these actions exist to serve the mechanics of a video game, not the logic of a narrative. The Star Destroyer moment is another example. In the game, Starkiller physically drags a massive Star Destroyer out of the sky while fighting waves of TIE fighters. It's visually amazing, one of the most iconic scenes in any Star Wars game or media, and absolutely is not intended as a one-to-one depiction of what happened. The novelization handles it in a far more grounded way. Starkiller influences the descent of the Star Destroyer that is already falling, and does so under exhaustion, strain, and desperation. The act itself is still impressive, but it isn't the cartoonishly exaggerated display seen in the game. As you can see, the novelization really is the authentic portrayal of the Force Unleashed. It doesn't bend itself into a spectacle-driven action game. It simply tells the story. Starkiller's growth, his emotional conflicts, his brutal training under Vader, his bond with Juno, and most importantly, his internal tug of war between darkness and redemption. It tracks his evolution in a way that feels grounded in Star Wars storytelling, culminating in his final sacrifice and the birth of the rebellion. The novel reads like Star Wars, it feels like Star Wars, and for fans who care about the expanded universe as a coherent timeline, the novelization is the version that naturally fits with the rest of the expanded universe. Not because of headcanon, not because of preference, but because it's written within the established narrative framework that the expanded universe consistently used. The novel also offers something the game could never do: insight into Starkiller's mind. In the book, we see his guilt, his trauma, his confusion, his loyalty to Vader, and his gradual awakening to the truth of what he has become. The emotional weight of his transformation is far richer on the page than what can be conveyed through gameplay or cutscenes. His fear of Vader is more palpable, his attraction to Juno is more human, his awareness of the darkness within himself is more detailed, and his final act of sacrifice, calm, deliberate, and full of clarity, carries far more emotional resonance when described from his perspective. None of this contradicts the game. The novel gives the story depth and nuance. For this reason, the novelization has become the preferred reference for most fans who want a grounded understanding of Galen Merrick and the events that shaped the Rebel Alliance. The misconceptions surrounding The Force Unleashed almost always comes from relying on the game alone. The exaggerated boss fights, the cinematic enhancements, and the necessary spectacle of a high-energy action experience, but the story of The Force Unleashed is much more than the game's mechanics. It's a tale with emotional weight, grounded character development, and a narrative that makes sense within the wider Star Wars universe. The novelization presents that story clearly and consistently, which is why expanded universe fans overwhelmingly treat it as the true representation of what happened. Starkiller didn't overpower Vader in a fight. He didn't duel the Emperor as an equal. His gameplay feats aren't meant to be taken literally. It is called The Force Unleashed after all. And the most compelling, coherent version of his story is the one found in the Novelization. It's a book that simply tells the story the way it's meant to be understood. If you want to know who Starkiller really was, and what happened in those final confrontations, and how the events of The Force Unleashed actually shaped the galaxy, the Novelization is where you'll find it. And that's it for the video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you enjoy content like this, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you around. Have a good one.
I wonder if there's a McDonald's around here.
Christ the Redeemer, absolutely brilliant.
There he is! Fucking run to the left side! He's gone! Underbow baby! Underbow baby! Ah! I'm gonna kill myself and make you all watch!